Good morning, folks. It's Carpo here. It's about 5:30 in the morning. Still getting my waking on. I just got up, I got my cup of coffee, and I got ready, and I turned on a couple of YouTube videos, and instantly came across something that I had to respond to. And I haven't done this in a while, because I used to always respond to particular subjects that I would hear. I'd see a video, and I'd be like, I have to make a response to that because of this or that. And when they removed the response video option, I don't know, I just haven't really done it in a while, but one guy I've been subscribed to for a long time, who I watch once in a while, is Gabriel Kundalini, and many of his ideas I share interest in, and some I don't, just like everybody else on YouTube. I go through phases where I'll watch a certain person maybe for a while or not, and he's one I haven't watched in a while. He hasn't done videos in a while, but one popped up this morning about humans killing each other, or humans killing non-vegans, and I could tell by the title that it was kind of one of those titles that's to get your attention, and I wasn't even going to click on it because I didn't want to get involved in that whole vegan debate again with anybody, but I had to see what he was talking about, so I checked it out. And he was disgusted by this particular video he ran across, and he considered it hate speech, and he wanted to have it pulled off YouTube. And this guy, whose name is, I guess, Gary Yurovsky, he is a vegan who was interviewed on this Emily Girl's channel, and he's promoting violence against non-vegans. And I listened to the whole interview because I wanted to say, maybe he's just saying, well, sometimes, we need to get a little rough, or, stand up for ourselves. But no, he was using Nazi Germany and slavery and all the different oppression of the world as an excuse to where violence is necessary sometimes. And he's claiming basically violence against non-vegans may be necessary. I even believe there was one part where he talked about, how if people came in with machine guns and held them up to people at the slaughter factory, and forced them to release the animals or whatnot, then, it would make an impact. And I'm listening to this guy talk, and I say, here's this guy sitting here who's this supposed vegan, a lover of life, I guess, but this happens with many animal lovers. People become such animal lovers to the point where they start hating humans because they see how humans treat animals. I've met people who have a lot of dogs and say they don't like humans, they just like animals, or cats or whatnot, cat ladies, and become distant to people because we can't get along with people. Now here's the thing, the animals do not, they're unable to convey their true feelings or emotions mostly because they don't really have an opinion on life. Animals are not designed to have an opinion on life as far as we know. And I'm not sitting here saying they're not conscious. I'm saying that animals, they don't ponder things like we do, and they don't have to deal with the same decision-making processes that we do. They just run naturally on their instinct. And yes, some animals make decisions, plenty of animals do, but that's not my point. My point is that humans are constantly making decisions. That's all we do. And one of those decisions happens to be the decision whether or not to eat meat. And for a white bread chicken shit American motherfucker to sit there in his chair and say that everybody should be vegan, that's fine and dandy when you're a well-off guy who has money, you're able to pay for your groceries, you have local healthy grocery stores to go to. But you don't live in Zimbabwe, and you don't live in the jungle, and you don't live in the desert, and you don't eat anything that you can possibly get your hands on because there's hardly any food out there. Now, I'm not justifying eating meat, and my point here is not to, because I would love to see humans go vegan. That would be great. Some of the suggestions for humans going vegan have been eating insects. Oh, wait, that's not veganism. That's eating life. And my question is, where do you draw the line between insects and, let's say, fleas, or down to microbial life? I mean, what is life? When does life cease to be life? And, is a plant conscious? And all these things come up, and these discussions just go nowhere. And this is the circular argument of veganism. We want everybody to be vegan, but 90% of the world is not. Well over 90% of the world is not vegan. And I'd say a majority of them are in Western countries, which are, maybe it's some sort of a residual guilt from killing so many animals, or that we're exposed to seeing what really happens in the slaughterhouse. But if you look at other cultures, often the children, the parents, everyone is part of the process, the revering process of killing an animal. And just like the Native Americans are a perfect example. A lot of folks will say, look, the natives lived in harmony with their land. They were able to, and of course there were many tribes, so that's generalizing, but that they were able to live in harmony with their land, and they knew how to take only what they needed, and they used everything. But they were all meat eaters. There were no vegetarian Native Americans as far as I know. They ate meat because it was available. But when they killed the animal, they said a prayer to the Great Spirit. They did a respectful ceremony, and they used all the pieces of the animal, and everyone helped, down to the children. So people grew up seeing, from the time you were, a year old, you see this animal dead and bleeding in front of you and watch him die, and then you eat him out of the respect for nature, knowing that they had to, that they couldn't live on just nuts and berries, and they had to have venison in order to survive. We've moved into a world where that's no longer necessary, where we don't have to have meat. We don't have to have meat if we live in a Western world, but the rest of the world does. And that's just the way it is. Now, before you attack me and say, no, there's more than enough grain to feed the world, I do agree. Unfortunately, where we're at right now, the grain is being used, a lot of it for animal feed, a lot of it for making ethanol, and I think if we did rearrange our priorities as a species, we could actually get to the point where we wouldn't need meat anymore. And that's a fantastic idea. But at this moment right now, we're not there. We're at a crossroads where people are educated, making decisions for their future, and teaching their kids how to, respect nature. But let's not advocate violence against people. This is where I draw the line. I mean, this is too much. Some of the comments in the comment section on that video, one kid said, he said, when I was in school, I remember some kid was burning ants to tease me. So I beat the shit out of him, and he never burned ants again. All of the responses were positive. Yay, good job, buddy. All right. And all the thumbs up on these comments and on this video were all positive towards advocating violence towards humans. This is a very, very shallow, short-sighted view. I have to say pathetic and point the finger and say shame on you. Shame on you if you're ever advocating violence against a human for a non-violent human action. Now, this is where it gets confusing, because the justification that this guy was using is that, well, humans are being violent because we're being violent against animals. Well, you have to know the situation, okay, of each situation. We, as a whole of a species, are abusing by that privilege by eating things like McDonald's, eating fast food, going out and buying meat as our constant staple of our diet. In many cultures, meat is just something that's added to the dish, not something that is the main dish. Only in America and Western culture is the steak the center of attention on a plate, whereas in other cultures you add a little bit of chicken with your rice, or and and I think if we were still living in that way, we'd have more than enough food. And if animals were still killed by individuals respectfully, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But we have a collective guilt as a humanity about what we've done and what we're doing. And we don't know where to go about it and how to solve the problem. We have to educate each other. We tell our kids what they should and shouldn't eat. We tell our kids, why they should or shouldn't eat meat. This is a personal decision, but it's nobody else's decision to, harm another human over it. So this is equivalent to hate speech and propaganda, what the guy is saying, basically. To wish any harm upon humans because of their choice of food is no different than a jihadist who is making a hate speech video saying kill all non-believers. It is exactly the same, because they're both lifestyle choices that people make. A majority of people are not Muslim, a majority of people are meat eaters. Both of those ideas, even though it's religion and food, there's still choices that people make. And people are killed over choices every day. But when we look at it as a religion, we say, that's ridiculous, a person would kill another over their beliefs. But killing a person over their food choices is even more complicated. So, Carpo, what are you saying? What's your solution? Well, all I'm saying is that getting mad and throwing our fists out is not going to solve the problem of meat being a staple of our diet. It's obvious that education is the only way to change our behavior, which means that, yes, a lot of people eat meat now, but our parents didn't know any better or care. They ate meat because their parents ate meat. They raised us eating meat. I grew up eating hot dogs and the mac and cheese and all the other stuff, and only in my later years now, and as you know, I'm 40 tomorrow actually, I'm finally stopping eating meat. I'm finally slowing down to where I don't eat very much. I have my, total vegan smoothie mix. I do eat meat once in a while, but I don't make it a big point where I'm going to starve myself because, it's meat. I'm just using common sense and rationality, and I rarely eat a hamburger or anything like that. But let's say I was at a party and somebody decided to promote violence against me because they saw me eating my monthly meat patty or something, maybe it was all there was to eat. Nobody knows the full situation of what's going on in another person's life, or, it shouldn't matter. This is a long way of pussyfooting around the fact that the guy's a cocksucker. He's anybody who advocates violence because of what they believe is a piece of shit in my eyes, and that's the nicest way I can put it. But at the same time, that makes me feel guilty even for saying that, because I know that he means well. As far in his mind, he thinks that that's okay. He's angry because people are mistreating animals, so he's generalizing the whole of people who eat animals. And I really don't want to get into the semantics or what about people who eat, small animals, or, I've had several discussions with vegans about exactly what dictates being a vegan, as far as who made the choices up that a vegan cannot eat cheese. Okay, cheese is a byproduct of the cow. It doesn't harm the cow. But the justification is say, we're not designed to eat drink milk past a certain age, so we shouldn't need milk or cheese. Maybe so, but does that mean that we shouldn't drink it if we want it, or eat it if we want it? In other words, having some cheese on a bagel, and thinking, I can't eat that because in my book it tells me that I'm a vegan, and this is what vegans do. Start thinking for yourself is what I'm saying. When I started realizing that eggs were chicken fetuses and really thinking about it, it started to disgust me. And for a while I couldn't eat eggs. But I still eat eggs once in a while. I still enjoy some scrambled eggs. And I remember when I told my kid what chicken eggs really were. And he was just shocked. And he doesn't eat them anymore at all. And this is what I'm saying. You educate your children on what things are, and they'll make a decision of whether they think it's right or wrong. Without imposing our value system on them to the point where we make them feel guilty for eating a certain thing. If you try to teach your kids not to eat any meat, they're going to grow up having a rough time at times with kids at school, or with going to other people's houses, going on trips, all these things that we don't think about at first. It's just like every parent who says, I would raise my kid vegan. They're the same kind of parents who say, I'm going to homeschool my kids. There's no way I'd send them to a public school. I said that too, and I really wish I could, but the reality is we don't have the time for a lot of the things that we'd like to do, like, to teach our children as well as possible, but we have to make the time. And kids are going to grow up with a whole new world. I was talking with my mom. I don't want to go too far because this video is already long, but I was talking with my mom the other day about this, and how kids are growing up with a completely different, a different world than I did, and how I grew up in a different world than she did, and she was kind of at this, what do we do? Everything seems just so overwhelming kind of attitude, and I'm very underwhelmed by it all. I guess it's overwhelming, the entirety of what's going on in the world, but it's no different than it's ever been. It's just larger and more complex. but it's still hanging by a thread. Tomorrow, anything could happen. The shit might hit the fan. The older the generation is, the more stuck in their ways and believing system they are. Which means that trying to turn, say, those in their 60s and 70s into vegans is impossible. That's not going to happen. It's just like trying to educate many people that are, say, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and telling them that the world is, in turmoil, and trying to explain conspiracy theories. That people just don't care about all that. They've lived their raw years, I guess, and now they're just they're easing down. They don't have the time and the intensity to worry about these things or to change the way they live, but many still do, because many are still in that process. They haven't given up. They're always changing the way they live without saying, oh, well, it's just how it's always been. But my point here is that things are the way they've always been because we've allowed them to be. And over time and over the next few years, people are going to start to see that, next few decades, I should say, as the next generation grows up, we're going to see a whole new value system instilled. It's not a new value system. It's the real value system that we should have had the whole time, or that we once did. Population may decline and shrink and go back down to a smaller population. In fact, it looks like we're already kind of peaking out. But amidst all this craziness and chaos, we've learned a lot about ourselves. We thought that ranching was okay. We thought that it was all right to hold animals in pens and to use them as commodities for food because they were delicious. Why not? They weren't conscious. They weren't aware. Our parents were told that animals had no feelings. Hell, when I was a kid, my parents taught me, or not taught me, but my parents' generation, they were saying that dogs and cats really don't think about anything, that they're just, roam around. But everybody knows that. Everybody knows you can look a dog in the eye and know that he has a personality. And would you kill and eat your own dog? No. That's very unacceptable in a lot of parts of the world, that dogs and cats are just, even if you're starving, people won't eat their own animals. Then again, in a lot of cultures, pigs and chickens and rabbits are house pets too, and in some cultures we eat them. So I'll just leave it at that. Remember that a Western culture, a white Western boy sitting in a room talking about advocating violence against people for eating meat shows that he has a lack of understanding of the way that the world really works. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do, because I'm privy to the same information, or lack thereof, as the next guy. But I can look at the world situation and say, going vegan at this point is not going to be a flick of the switch for the entire world. And there are going to be arguments about what consists of a life. And people will get down from, say, well, is it okay to eat smaller rodents or animals, or do they have a consciousness? And then people will say, what about insects? Because insects act as a whole, as a community. Are they aware? Are they conscious? And microbes and on down the chain. Everything we eat is alive. Whether plants have feelings, we don't know. It may be on a different level, but we have to eat. So we know that plants are here for us to eat. So we're not going to argue that plants are conscious, we can't eat them, and just starve ourselves. But for some reason, people have decided that animals should not be eaten, and then they're instilling and pressing that upon everyone else. So I guess I'll put a link to the video so people can see what they think about it. I would not... The only time I would ever advocate violence against another person is when that person is advocating violence against you. But, I mean, I'm not going to bullshit here. I mean, I understand the point of view. If a person, or let's say a guard, was holding a bunch of people prisoner and the only way out was violence, then humans are penned up. And I would say it's okay to fight for your own freedom if you have to. And in the same way, but this is the justification that this guy was using. Say, if all these animals are penned up and there's a human guarding it, then it's okay for humans to use violence against other humans to free those animals. And what I'm saying, because the animals can't defend themselves. And what I'm saying is that I understand that point of view. I understand where that's coming from. But it's not right. You cannot commit violence against another human You have to educate them to why they're doing what they're doing is wrong and show them another path. Because otherwise, those animals will just end up in another pen somewhere else. In other words, we're not going to change people eating meat by beating them up. So, hope I didn't ran on too long there, but just one of those subjects.